when the abuse escalated to physical abuse, I felt very much, like lots of people that have been in abusive relationships, that your self-esteem is eroded. I felt like I couldn't speak up. I couldn't say no, so my sense of self had been destroyed by that point. But in speaking out in any way, it generally created some kind of argument and escalation.
And that's the difficult choice the women who are being abused have, is that if you're impregnated, if you get pregnant from a person that is abusing you, there is a very difficult choice you have to make, right? The choice is, let's be very clear, honest, right? It's an abortion, right?
Yes.
Or to not abort the child, right? And it's a
Mm-hmm.
conversation that I think some people don't have. Some people may say that, well, I can't do the first one. And that's perfectly fine. This is not,
Mm-hmm.
that's your choice, right? But
Mm-hmm.
then there's some people out there saying that, you know what? I'm going to be tied to this person forever. Do I want one, that connection, and two, do I want my child that connection, right? Because what you have to think about, ladies and
Exactly.
gentlemen, is from the woman's perspective, if you're being abused by someone and you give birth to that child, let's say, for example, you have a little girl, and that girl grows up seeing the abuse, she's going to think it's normal, right?
Yeah.
On the flip side, if you have a son now and he sees the abuse, he's going to think that's the way you have to treat women to get respect. So now what you're going through, you're passing it on to another generation, and it's unfair in that regard. Would you agree, Jude?
I think there's, I could only make the decision for myself. And like I say, I think in an abusive situation, you can only make that decision for yourself ultimately at that time. Like I said, did I have clarity of thought at that time? I was 45 and I really wanted to be a mother. So it was a really difficult decision for me to make. Um, but I wasn't only just thinking about me. I was also, like you've just said, thinking about that child that would also then have some kind of relationship with the abuser.
And that is so tough. That is such a difficult decision because everyone, I would argue that there are many people out there that know someone that has either been abused,
Hmm.
and this is going to hurt some people's feelings right now, or they know someone that is abusing someone,
Yes. Yes.
right? I know it's kind of mainstream now. We have a lot of celebrities and they're being caught, but ladies and gentlemen, there's an abuser in every family. Either you're aware of it or you're not aware of it, but you need to ask yourself a very serious question. If you are aware of it and you haven't done anything yet, why haven't you?
Hmm.
Right?
Yes. And for me, I suppose what I would say in connection to that is abuse generally happens behind closed doors. People don't generally see what is happening behind closed doors. What they see is, in my relationship, what they saw was this wonderful guy, this sales guy that could kind of talk anyone round in a room. They didn't see his behaviours, his false accusations, his put downs, his blaming, explosive temper. They didn't see any of that.
Yeah. And to that point as well, depending on how old we are, like the age of the person, it's very likely that abuse was a way for their parents to control a certain behavior when they were growing up, right? Like I think sometimes, and this is not to justify what people are doing, I think a lot of times we forget that it wasn't that long ago where we used hitting and that type
Mm-hmm.
of discipline to correct a
Mm-hmm.
behavior, or at least
Yeah.
to control a certain type of behavior, right? So you have
Mm-hmm.
people growing up thinking that's the way to do it. And there's some people who aren't maybe self aware enough to say that, you know what, I didn't like it as a child, so I'm not going to do it. Some people are
Mm-hmm.
just like, that's just the way it is. So when I enter a
Mm-hmm.
relationship now and I'm not getting my way, or
Mm-hmm.
I want to correct another adult's behavior, which is kind of weird to say, right? I do that, right? And then there isn't any consequence to me. And When you found out this person was this way, and then on top of that, they were having another relationship, what was going through your mind during that time?
I felt helpless at that point. My self esteem was destroyed. Um, I just felt in a place where a real sense of shame, and felt like I couldn't speak out to people and kind of say how things had escalated, that no one could see this. Would someone believe me? Because that's not what people saw. So and being a professional as well, because I was working as a therapist at the time, how do I then stand up and say to people, this is what's happening in my relationship? And ultimately, towards the end of the relationship, when it became physically abusive, I did do that. I spoke out to 3 people.
Yeah, the abusers are always like a perfect role model in public,
Yes.
right? It's behind closed doors, but a sign of the abuser is the person that's being abused, because they're the one who has to keep the secret. They're the one who
Hmm.
has to keep the charade going, right? But
Hmm.
eventually they can't do anymore. They realize, you know what? It's not fair to me, because you
Yes.
get in a state of mind where it's like you're protecting that person's
Hmm.
image, right?
Hmm.